Somewhere over the Pacific, an F-22 pilot is sealed inside a cockpit barely bigger than a phone booth, breathing through a mask, wearing a suit that's about to squeeze the blood right out of his legs, with 9 hours still left on the clock. He hasn't had a drink of water in hours. He won't eat a real meal until he's back on the ground. And underneath him sits one of the most advanced machines ever built, with stealth, with super crews, with sensors that can spot a threat before it even knows it's being watched. But none of that matters if the person flying it can't make it through the day. So how do you keep a human being functioning for 9 hours inside a machine that's actively working against their body? Let's get into it. To understand why this is so brutal, you have to understand what the F-22 actually is. It's a single-seat stealth fighter. There's no second crew member to split the workload, no autopilot that lets you walk away, and barely enough room to shift your weight. On a short training flight, that's fine. But Raptors based out of places like Alaska, Hawaii, and Guam regularly fly missions across the Pacific that stretch the aircraft's range to its absolute limit, and the only way to make that work is aerial refueling. A tanker meets the jet in the air, the Raptor plugs in, and the flight just keeps going. On paper, that means the jet's range becomes almost unlimited. In practice, it means the pilot's body becomes the bottleneck. So before any of that even starts, the prep work begins on the ground, and it's nothing like what you'd expect. You'd think a pilot getting ready for a 9-hour mission would load up on water and a big breakfast. They do almost the opposite. Many pilots deliberately cut back on fluids hours before stepping to the jet because once that helmet goes on and that mask seals around their face, there is no easy way to deal with a full bladder for hours at a time. Then comes the gear. Underneath the flight suit, pilots wear what's sometimes called the exposure suit, a rubber-lined layer that's basically there in case they end up ejecting over the ocean. Over that goes the anti-G suit, which looks like a pair of inflatable chaps wrapped around the legs and waist. When the jet pulls hard, sensors detect the G-force and automatically inflate those bladders, squeezing the legs and abdomen like a blood pressure cuff. That squeeze forces blood back up toward the heart and brain instead of pooling in the legs, and it's the difference between staying conscious during a hard turn and blacking out, and that's not a small deal. At just 4 Gs, most people's hearts can't keep up with pushing blood to the brain. Vision starts going gray, then it tunnels, then it's gone. The G-suit buys a pilot roughly an extra 1.5 to 2 Gs of tolerance. The F-22 can sustain 9 Gs, so that suit isn't a comfort item. It's the only thing standing between a hard maneuver and a pilot losing consciousness at 50,000 feet. Now add the mask. For most of the Raptor's early service life, that oxygen system was actually one of its biggest problems. Between 2008 and 2011, more than 20 pilots reported unexplained oxygen deprivation in flight, serious enough that the entire fleet was grounded at one point while investigators tried to figure out why pilots were getting confused, dizzy, or blacking out mid-flight. The Air Force eventually traced part of the issue to the pressure vests pilots were wearing underneath everything else, vests that weren't deflating properly and made it physically hard to breathe under high G. They pulled those vests, added backup oxygen systems, and kept digging. But it's a reminder that even with a jet this advanced, the most fragile system on board is still the human breathing inside it. Okay, so the jet's in the air, 9 hours on the clock. Here's where it gets almost absurd. There's no food service, no snack cart. If a pilot wants to eat, it's whatever they can fit into a pocket of their flight suit or strap to their leg before takeoff. Energy bars, jerky, anything that doesn't need both hands and doesn't make a mess in a cockpit where every surface is covered in switches and displays. And then there's the bathroom problem, which honestly might be the most universally dreaded part of long-duration flying. Pilots have what's called a piddle pack, a thick bag with absorbent material inside that turns liquid into a gel so it doesn't slosh around the cockpit. Using one means unzipping a flight suit that's specifically designed to open from both ends, all while wearing gloves, a mask, and a harness, in a seat where you genuinely cannot stand up. One pilot who's flown missions over 8 hours long has described it as one of the most common questions people ask him, right up there with how fast the jet goes. And it's not just awkward. There have been real incidents where pilots got distracted mid-relief during high workload moments, which is exactly the kind of thing you do not want happening at altitude. So a lot of pilots try to avoid the problem entirely by just not drinking much. Which sounds smart until you realize dehydration does the opposite of what they need. It lowers G tolerance, slows reaction time, and makes it harder to stay sharp for hour 8 when things might actually start happening tactically. If you're into the stuff, most documentaries skip over the unglamorous human side of military aviation. This is exactly the kind of thing we dig into every week, so if that's your thing, go ahead and subscribe, because the bathroom and the snacks are honestly the easy part. The real fight is staying mentally sharp for 9 hours straight. By hour 6 or 7, fatigue starts working against a pilot just as hard as any adversary would. This is where something called go pills come in, prescribed stimulants, usually a low-dose amphetamine that some pilots use on extraordinarily long sorties to stay alert enough to fly the jet safely and land it in one piece. It's tightly controlled and only used when missions genuinely demand it, but it tells you everything about how far outside normal human limits these flights push people. And through all of this, the pilot is still doing the actual job. Managing radar, tracking other aircraft, staying aware of fuel state, coordinating with tankers, all while wearing roughly 30 pounds of gear and trying not to think too hard about how badly they need to use that piddle pack. So why do it? Why does anyone sign up for 9 hours of dehydration, cramped muscles, and rationed snacks inside a machine that's actively trying to choke them out under high G? Because the alternative is not having that jet in the sky at all. The F-22's entire advantage, its stealth, its speed, its ability to see threats before they see it, only matters if it can actually get to where it's needed and stay there. Every uncomfortable hour in that cockpit is the price of keeping that capability in the air. It's easy to look at a fighter jet and think the technology is the impressive part, and it is. But the technology was built around the assumption that a human being would still be the one flying it, fighting fatigue, fighting their own bladder, fighting their own blood pressure the entire time. The jet might be the most advanced flying machine on the planet. The person inside it is still just a person. That's the part of stealth aviation nobody puts on a recruiting poster. There's another one on screen if you want to keep going.